I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today I am joined by Mr. Calvin Bagley. Through severe physical, emotional, and spiritual abuse, Calvin has learned to survive by observing, adapting, and quietly believing there had to be more. He eventually taught himself how to read, earned a GED, and put himself through college, and was able to build multiple successful companies, including a national Medicare organization that helps tens of thousands of Americans each year. He even became a bishop in the same church his parents once used to justify their extremism, reclaiming the faith they distorted. Today, he is an author, entrepreneur, and advocate helping others break cycles of control and fear to live with purpose, integrity, and love. His best selling memoir, Hiding from the School Bus, shares that journey from a boy hiding in the Utah desert to a man leading with compassion and faith. Calvin, thank you so much for coming on today. I can't wait to hear your story, and I think this is going to be a really impactful thing for a lot of people to hear because I feel like a lot of people are going to really relate to it. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Noah. It's great to be here with you.
So kind of just take me back to the beginning and kind of share a little bit about what childhood was like for you and kind of um what was it about childhood that was kind of what you would consider not the oddity of other kids.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to start there because, my book, Hiding from the School Bus, it's kind of, it's very creatively written and has received a few awards for the creativity and just the beauty of how the story's told. I'm very proud of that. But it kind of is told in the way that my mind works, which is like everything is happening all at the same time. You ever watch that movie, Everything All at Once or whatever? It's like everything's happening all at once in my brain. Everything is a circle. So I sometimes don't tell things in a linear fashion from like, here's where it started and here's where it is. So this will be fun to kind of start from that way. I grew up in a fundamentalist Mormon home, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, often known as the Mormons. But my parents were very extreme in their beliefs. They weren't mainstream, LDS, Mormon, whatever. They
Mm.
had all these other weird ideas about how life should be lived, and they were very rigid about some really odd things. And the reason that that happened is that I, before I was born, my parents, who had 9 children, and I was the seventh of 9 children, had moved from Salt Lake City, Utah, in the city, out to some very, very, very uh, far, far away place on the edge of Utah and Colorado, near the Colorado Wyoming border, where there were no neighbors and there was no one around us at all. And my parents both, they had children. I guess they loved us. I guess they loved the idea of us. I don't know. And we also worked very hard for them on the farm. So when I was born, I was the seventh and of nine. I My mom brought me home from the hospital going down this, 30-mile country road followed by 30 miles of dirt road just to the middle of nowhere, no neighbors, no anything. And she handed me to my sister who was 14 years older than me. And my sister relates the story that she said, uh, happy birthday, because it was my sister's birthday right after mine. And she said, this one's yours. And she literally handed me to my sister. And my sister kind of raised me my first few years as if I were her child. And so, that this was the home kind of devoid of like parental love. And part out of necessity with us living so far away from everything, my parents started homeschooling, but not homeschooling, like you think of homeschooling today, where there's like books and things to study and what have you. We were homeschooled with no materials. I had no books to study. My sister had to teach me to read. When I was 7 years old, I asked my mom if I could learn how to read, and she was like, "Well, I guess you're ready." And my sister taught me to read. One of my sisters. So yeah, that's kind of the beginnings and of what I call no schooling. Some people talk about homeschooling. I would say that I was no schooled and just grew up far, far away, detached from reality and detached from the world.
As I kind of mentioned at the beginning, before we got started, that there was a video that you had posted on Podmatch that kind of was an intro to your life story, and your parents kind of had these wild kind of guidelines that you had to follow. What were some of the things that your parents had told you not to do growing up?
Well, the first thing was that we had to hide from the school bus when we from that distant, faraway place that we lived until I was 3 years old. We moved to another, farm that was had some neighbors within, a mile or two, and there were enough people around that the school bus would come by and pick up the kids and take them to school. And my parents told me to hide from the school bus because they were afraid that people would see, the school bus would see these children out there not getting an education in the middle of nowhere, not being picked up and gone to school, and that the authorities would be sent to our home. So we hid from the school bus. And when I was young, I did it because I thought my parents were right about stuff. And then as I got older, I did it because I was afraid to go to school because I knew that I didn't know anything. The one place that we associated with people and that there were a couple of kids my age was at church. So we'd go to church every Sunday, have a few hours where I would, mingle with the world, so to speak, and actually know people that weren't my family. And then it was back to home for another week. And so my parents had these really kooky ideas that began to develop, like boys were prohibited from wearing shorts. I owned my first pair of shorts in my 20s. you know, they thought that was immodest even for boys to wear shorts. We were not permitted to eat a lot of things because the Mormon Church has the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has these this law of health called the Word of Wisdom, where you don't drink coffee, tea, smoke tobacco, or drink alcohol. But my parents took it way, way far. We were not permitted to have chocolate. We couldn't eat red meat. I was raised mostly on vegetables. We grew our own potatoes and our own vegetables and fruit, not fruit, but tomatoes and things like that, and berries, and that's what we ate. And we would store the potatoes. We had a 5-acre farm. We grew all our own food, and we'd store the potatoes all winter. So they didn't allow us to be connected to anything that was connected to the world. We didn't listen to modern music. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. We didn't watch television. We got a microwave when I was like 13 years old, so we were just very disconnected from the world with all these strange rules that my parents had created.
Well, at what age did you kind of realize that these rules and guidelines were a little bit more strict? Did you have the sense that, oh, well, because wasn't able to do that, every other kid did it, or what was it like, kind of at first telling other people about what you could or couldn't do?
Yeah, like I said, the interaction I had with people would be at church. And so kids my age, they were into Star Wars. Star Wars was everything, lightsabers and everything. It's the late 70s and early 80s, and Star Wars is the
Mhm.
greatest. And my dad hated Star Wars because he said that it perverted the true nature of God, that the Force couldn't be good and evil, that good is one thing and evil is another thing. It's a whole thing I write about in my book, my dad's, weird theologies. And so at a very young age, probably because I was one of the younger kids, 7 of 9, I began to realize that we were weird, like really strange, and I could see it, and I realized it. So I remember from a very young age thinking that it was there was something off, and I think that my older siblings helped me to realize that. Now, in addition to that weird homeschooling thing, my parents would take weird, strange people into our house. There was, people that would be abusive to us. And then on top of that, my parents just kind of, I feel like we were just a means to an end. They relied on us to work the garden, to do chores. We had like, I don't know, at one point almost 40 goats and all these animals and everything. And we were like their workforce. And so it was, there was physical abuse, there was sexual abuse, there was emotional abuse, and we just didn't feel like we were loved. And so, someone hearing the story would say, "Well, this is a wild, crazy story. Like, how could I relate to that?" Well, I think a lot of people have grown up in a situation where they've experienced trauma in their childhood and have had to overcome something really, really difficult. And that's why I've shared my story. And maybe it'll help one person, maybe it'll help a million people. I don't know. I don't really care. I just felt compelled to share that you can start from a really difficult and challenging place and still succeed in life.
So once you kind of figured out okay, what we have here is a little strange. Did you try to leave the home at an early age, or did you wait till you were 18 to move out?
Yeah, I ran away more than once and lasted for a few hours and came back. You have this you, you just want to get away at all costs. And I remember packing a bag and telling my younger brother, who's 2 years younger than me, I was leaving and trying to convince him to go with me, but I was never really confident enough to do it on my own. I was probably, like 10 years old or something. And um but what happened is that my brother, just older than me, he was 3 years older than me, when he was 16 years old, he got he managed to convince my parents, because, well, let me say it this way: my older siblings began to rebel, like seriously rebel. My older sisters, like everybody's leaving religion. They don't want anything to do with God, church, anything. They are, you know, marrying. My older sisters were marrying people that my parents didn't approve of, and things, and running away. So my parents began to soften a little bit, and by the time my older brother was 16, they allowed him to get a job, because up until then, my older sisters, when they worked, they had to give their money to my parents. So when my brother Jeff got a job, and he began to make money on his own, he got a girlfriend, and she got pregnant, and they ran away from home, and they went to Wendover, Nevada. And so coming off of that, my parents were really stunned, because every one of their kids were rebelling, and at least, most of them in pretty dramatic ways. So at that point, when my brother moved from Wendover to Las Vegas, I was dying to get out. So in my late teens, I went to Las Vegas, and I spent a few weeks with my brother Jeff in Las Vegas, which is where I live now to this day. But I didn't stay at that time. I came back to my parents' house. I was almost 17 years old, and I said, "Listen, if Jeff said I could come live with him in Las Vegas, if you're going to let me kind of live my life, or I'm going to leave." And the threat was enough that they kind of let me do things that some of my older siblings were not able to do. So I got a job, and began making money. I bought a car and things. And I decided at that age, the one thing that had been stable in my life was the church and my faith in God. Everything else had just been a source of pain, and that I wasn't good enough. And so I felt a connection to God and religion that perhaps my siblings didn't. That wasn't my parents' connection. It was my own. And so I decided that I was going to become a missionary for the church, and I was going to go on my mission, which is customary back then. Now it's 18, but back then it was 19 years old. And so at 19 years old, so I lived in my parents' house, but sort of lived my own life for 17, 18, 19. When my friends and I went on my mission, and I was sent to Brazil of all places. And that was like this transformational experience for me to go to Brazil for 2 full years to learn Portuguese. I mean, to learn Portuguese when I had no education was so difficult. I had to I had to learn English to learn Portuguese. I had to learn what a noun was and what a verb was and these types of things because I didn't have any of that understanding. So learning Portuguese taught me English, and that was when I officially left home was at 19 years old.
I think another thing that really is amazing is that um, you had described that your childhood was mostly full of, you really didn't have any technic typical school learning, that you were technically no school, but then you went on and was able to get a GED, you were able to get a college degree, and eventually you became like this huge successful leader. Did you struggle going to college? And because you had lost a lot of years of teaching up until that point, and there was a lot that you had to catch up and learn. What was that process like of going to get your education, and what was it? Was it more difficult to learn a lot of things that your childhood was kind of taken away from?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because when I went to college, it was the first time I had ever set foot in a classroom in my life. I had never taken a test. I had never, you know, had a term paper or a writing assignment. I had never sat through a lecture, let alone a day full of lectures. I mean, the structure of college was really hard for me. The structure of
Mhm.
education, I had never experienced that. So it was quite a crazy experience. So here's what happened is I came back from Brazil and I decided that I wanted to get an education. I have had, if you see Mormon missionaries, it's always two of them together, and it's
Mhm.
called your companion. So I always had a mission companion, and most of my mission companions were Americans who had come to Brazil too, and they were coming back. I had one companion that was going to Stanford, and a couple that were going to like BYU, the church school, and all this, University of Utah, and all these places. And I was feeling really left behind because the only goal that I had in life was to go on a mission. After that, I wasn't sure how life was going to go because I just knew that I didn't add up. I had no education. So I said, I don't know what it's going to take, but I am going to go to college. And none of my siblings had ever gone to college at this point. Like I said, I'm number 7. My parents haven't been to college. My grandparents haven't been to college. So I studied and got my GED. It took me many months of hard study. I went and bought a book at the store, the bookstore that was like a GED. Because back then we didn't have Amazon and stuff. We're talking, like the mid '90s. The internet was just barely coming about. And I sat at night after work and studied. And one night I was there studying, and my dad came in. My dad's, was pretty critical of education, as you can imagine, and he was
Mhm.
suspect of all institutions, education, government, um, law enforcement, just school system, the healthcare system. Some of the stories I write about being sick and almost dying of pneumonia as a child, like literally struggling to breathe as a young, like preteen. And my dad would give me horse penicillin shots. He kept horse penicillin in the fridge. He would draw up a big shot of horse penicillin and just give me a shot in the butt of horse penicillin. And eventually finally took me to the hospital when I was just turning blue because I almost died. So they just completely I'll tell you, this is crazy. At one point, after I'd left home, my dad's appendix burst. And instead of going to the doctor for days, he gave himself colloidal silver. If you're familiar with that, it's silver in water. He would give himself colloidal silver enemas with silver water until he passed out. And my mom took him to the hospital, and they're like, he should be dead right now. His system was full of infection. It took them weeks in the hospital, and he almost died. Like he just just crazy ideas. So he came in when so go back to my GED. He came in while I'm studying my GED, and he saw that I was studying for that, and he said, "What do you need that for? Do you need them to give you a piece of paper to tell you that you're smart?" And he did not, you know, support me or celebrate when I did get my GED. And so I was the first person in our family to graduate from high school, so to speak,
Mm.
and get my GED. Others have followed after, including my older siblings. So then, some of my older siblings. So then I decided I was going to go to college, and you can't just go to college. So I asked people, and I said, what do you need to go to college? And they're like, well, you need to pass an entrance exam, like the ACT was really popular back then versus the SAT.
Mm.
So I got another big book, and I'm like, I'm going to study the ACT so I can go to college. And I sat at home trying to study the ACT. Well, if you can imagine, I had about 4 months to prepare. You can't make up a lifetime of learning in 4 months. You just can't do it.
Mm-mm.
So I studied and studied and studied, and I went and took the exam. By the time it was done, my head hurt so bad. I did the very best I could. And with the ACT, you can't fail, so that's nice. But I got a 16. Well, you got to have at least a 20 or something to get into college. I don't know. No one would take me. Yeah, I applied to even the community college, one of the community colleges, and was denied. So then, me kind of being sad and not knowing what to do with my life, my brother in Las Vegas, Jeff, again called me and said, how'd it go? And I'm like, I told him I just totally failed it and I couldn't get accepted into college. And he's like, come down to Las Vegas and live with me. He was married at the time to his second wife, and she was a registered nurse that had gone through college and was educated. And he said, we will help you figure this out. So I moved to Las Vegas, and my sister-in-law took me to another store and bought me all the grade books for math. And she would open the books and be like, does this look familiar? Does this look familiar? Do you know how to do this? We had to go all the way down to third grade math. And I started with third grade math, and I studied with her third grade through 12th grade math. And then when I felt like I could, because math was what I was most afraid of everything, then I got an appointment to go to UNLV, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, here in Las Vegas, and met with an admissions counselor. And I told the admissions counselor my whole story. I told her about, learning to read, about learning the alphabet backwards because no one had taught me. Like when I was a kid,
Mm.
the alphabet was around the top of our living room, and no one had taught me. So I memorized it: Z Y X W V U T S R Q P O N M L K G I H G F E D C B A. Like I had it backwards, and I explained all this to her, and she kind of took pity on me and also appreciated my story. And she said, "Listen, you can come to school. We can't admit you. You don't have any background. You don't have a transcript. You don't have a high school diploma. You essentially failed the ACT. But you can come as a non-admitted student, and you can audit the classes. We'll still give you a grade, but it won't count towards anything. If you do that for 2 semesters and you get passing grades, we will admit you as an admitted student." And I studied very hard. My sister-in-law helped me. I spent a lot of time at the library. I had a real challenge with the structure of school, but I got through those 2 semesters with a perfect 4.0 and was admitted to UNLV. And that's how I successfully got into college.
That's amazing. I've never heard of that method before. Usually, if you don't have any kind of, and this might be, it might differ between universities and colleges, but I feel like if you didn't have any school knowledge at all, you couldn't get in at all. I'm not. I didn't know that they had that option where you could come and get like essential credits for it or something, and then if you pass it, then we can admit you off that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I don't think it's a program. She found a way to help me out, and I'm very grateful to her for that.
That kind of shows you how much um how really professional the school is, and how good they are with students that come from those kinds of backgrounds, that even though that you don't fit any of requirements they still would like to have you on campus. Most campuses would have turned you away. And I wouldn't feel bad about the ACT as someone that went to kindergarten and was went through the normal schooling and everything. I got like a 14 or 16 on my ACT as well. So don't feel bad. Teachers have this kind of persona that the ACT is like the be all things where it's like, oh, if you don't do well, then that means you can't get into colleges. I don't want people to think that that kind of shows you your intelligence at all. That's not that's not going to be the definition of intelligence. It's just a test like a normal test is. I wish colleges didn't really have to truly focus on that. I think colleges should focus more on high school grades and more on academic grades from your primary school years than look at one number on a one test. I think that's kind of I think we need to ditch the ACT SAT stuff. They actually did, and then I swear if I saw like some article that said that they were actually bringing the ACT back, and I thought, well,
Mm.
that's lovely. So so now they're kind of going back to you have to kind of get accepted based off of ACT scores. I think they were just like admitting that anyone and everyone now you didn't
Yeah.
really have to take those tests, but I think they've now are starting to infiltrate that back into to be normal. And and that's also impressive about you being able to learn the alphabet backwards. I can barely do it forwards as it is. I have to count on my fingers every time I have to get to a letter. Like, it's like, okay, what's the 10th letter in the alphabet? I have to go A, B, C, D. It's
You know what's
so,
crazy, Noah, is that something I did not understand for many, many years is that I was so concerned that I didn't know anything and that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't add up, and never really considered that there were people on the other side of this story who went to school and struggled with the same feelings that I was feeling, that they weren't good enough, that they didn't add up, that they weren't smart enough or whatever. And so sometimes like we get so caught up in our own mind and in our own experience that we don't even see that around us other people are from different circumstances are having the same feelings and struggles.
yeah, I've always told people when it comes to ACT, some people are going to be good at it, some people are not going to be good at it. If you don't do well in the ACT, don't let that affect you going forward. I don't want people to think, oh, because if you scored a low grade, that means you're dumb. No, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that you're not good at taking tests, and that's fine. Not everyone takes tests well. I don't, especially if it's a time test. I can't. Everyone has like a thing that they're good at. You said that you kind of struggle with math the most. I was actually always good at math. Everyone always would come to me for a math question, and if and I kid you not, it was a thing. If I didn't know how to do it, they'd be like, "He doesn't know how to do it. It's hard." It was like they would start going on strike because oh he doesn't even know it. Because I remember the seventh grade, I was put into a math class that was a little bit more kind of dumbed down for me. However, then it put me in the advanced classes because by senior year of my high school years, I would be taking like calculus and college level math. And so they decided to keep me in there, and it was a smart thing they did because I would not have been able to do calculus. Um, so they kind of put me in more of the standard math class. And I was technically the only one in the class that knew how to do anything. Everyone else was kind of either didn't want to learn or they just didn't quite understand. And I remember there was one subject that we were talking about. I can't remember what the lesson was. And they all looked at me and said, "Okay, how do you do?" And I said, "I actually honestly don't know." And it's like, "Oh my Lord, he doesn't know. We're screwed." It was literally this
If
whole
he doesn't
panic.
know,
It's like, well, if he doesn't get it, then we're
then it's
screwed. It was
impossible for the rest of us.
it literally was. I was the last one of determining if it was hard.
Yeah.
So I was kind of the brainiac of the class. Everyone had to come to me for help. And then when it was if I didn't know it, then they just kind of waved a white flag of, okay, we surrender. We can't do it. So
Yeah.
after
You know, it's
you
interesting that
had
how people's minds work differently. And that is one of the challenges of these of the standardized test is that, you know, it's looking for all this general knowledge. But I appreciate what you said that you can't look at that as a measurement of your of how intelligent you are. Um, and I think that I'm proof of that. Like I'm very intelligent. I just needed to learn and the opportunity to learn. And some people just need to learn a different way. Some people are visual. Some people are auditory, and you know, the way that you learn is really important. But you're not, you know, it's just a moment in time.
this is an interesting kind of follow-up question because people hear the story and it's like, oh, well, he finally got in college. But then a lot of people are probably asking, because this is the number one question in college that people ask you is, well, what career are you wanting to do? When you
Yeah.
got into college and was finally admitted, did you have a general idea of what you wanted to do professionally, or did you kind of just go with the flow of things and was taking classes, seeing if anything would have sparked any interest?
Yeah, no, I had no idea what to do. I had no clue. I had very little life experience, and the structure was really hard. So I actually quit. I lasted for 3 semesters. I quit. I became a flight attendant. I moved to Chicago. I started flying all over the world. It was such, I just, that was a whole incredible fun experience. But the, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And when I was 25, I think I had the life experience of a 15-year-old. I just had so much maturing to do.
Mm,
So I when I got the job as a flight attendant and moved to Chicago, I lived this whole other new life where I just got a ton of life experience. All of my friends were different than me, and all of my best friends and my roommates and everything were totally different from me. And we would travel all over the world and we did all these cool things together and just I had such a fun time. And it just gave me this incredible zest for travel and for seeing which actually going to Brazil is what gave me the mega travel bug, and travel has become a big part of my life. And then in my late 20s, it was 2001 and 9/11 happened. And I was on a plane that day. I was on a plane on the runway in Chicago. My plane did not take off. We were right. I think we were first in line for takeoff on the ready for our takeoff roll when they shut all the airports down,
mm,
and the world just changed. I mean, being in the airline industry, we were devastated. We knew me and my roommates and friends who had all become flight attendants together. We knew some of the people that died that day, and we also had our friends stranded all over the country wherever their plane had landed. They were stuck there for days. We're trying to find all of our friends and roommates and everything. I lived in a crash pad with like a dozen, flight attendants. It was a really fun and time in my life. And then so after 9/11, um, I decided, and at this point I was, like 27 years old, that I wanted to get a little more serious about life and return to school. So in December after 9/11, in December of 2001, I called my brother Jeff in Las Vegas again, and I was like, "Hey, is the is the room still open?" And I came back, and this time I came back with intention. And I went to UNLV. I started working a corporate job for a bank, and began to advance in my career at the bank. Pushed my way through college, and eventually graduated. By the time I graduated from college, I was married. My wife and I had met at school. She, by the way, was a professor at UNLV. I was an undergrad who was struggling to graduate to get all the way through. It was 11 years from the time I took the first class until I graduated with my degree in business administration. And it at the time by the time I graduated, I was a branch manager for Bank of America. My tellers and I would finish up the day. I say my tellers because my assistant manager would go home, and all those people, the personal bankers, they would go home, and me
mhm,
and the tellers would all go to school, and
mm,
we were all trying to get our degree. And I had my tellers. So a couple of my tellers actually took classes from my wife when we were engaged, and I needed to take the class that she taught for my business degree, but I made sure that I didn't take that one. I was going to take it from somebody else. So I didn't take my wife's class. And I graduated from college at 34 years old. Like I said, over 11 years from the time that I started. And it was such a proud day for me. And like a real sense of accomplishment that I'd done something that seemed impossible.
Well, I think that's such a that in itself is a huge success story. Is like going from basically being robbed from school all your childhood life to cramming 8 years of school essentially, or 9 years if I can do math. Nine, as I said, I was good at math. I can't do simple addition.
On the fly.
S- do like essentially 9 years of learning school material to college material. I mean, yeah, I don't think people can really understand how impressive that is to be able to learn everything in a short period of time. When it takes most of us 12 years and even more when we get to college to learn everything, you were able to learn everything in just like a few months. And I think that's shows you how dedicated that you were to it and everything. And I think hearing this story is really impactful. During this whole transition to graduating college, did you want to have a relationship with your parents at that time, or did you kind of leave them and never look back?
Yeah, that's a very thoughtful question. I did continue to speak to them and occasionally visit home, but our relationship has been, you know, very distant my entire adult life. And my father has passed away. By the time he passed away, he had some challenges in his mind. He passed away in his mid 80s, and he was really having dementia, and he couldn't
Mm,
really remember things very well. But the crazy thing is that that's when he was the nicest. So uh, I actually liked my dad when his mind got weak because I felt like his heart came through more, and he actually started to say things to me like, "I'm proud of you, and you have a beautiful family and a beautiful wife, and you've done really well in your career, and I'm proud of you." Things that he never would have said before. And so in a way, I'm grateful for that. Um, my mother is still alive today. We speak once in a while, mostly when something is kind of needed. I help take care of her, some of her, financial and other needs. She lives in a house that we moved to when I was 14 years old. Still lives in it. It's a very small house, essentially a trailer house. And I, make sure that this past year she had a problem with her roof, and then she had a problem with the septic system because it's out in the country, and I make sure that those things are taken care of. But I maintain sort of a distance and keep a healthy distance because um, there is still so much. Um, how would I say this? My parents, and especially my mom now, because my dad's sort of like I shared his story, still think that they did something really good. They still think that they gave me a proper upbringing. And anytime that I've had any success in life, my mom has said things like, "Well, it's a good thing we did this, or it's a good thing we did that, or I guess that homeschool ended up being pretty good after all. You graduated from college." And I'm like, "You don't appreciate what I struggled to overcome." And so, for my emotional health, and to keep me from, and this is connected to my emotional health, but to keep me from blowing up in ways that just aren't, they're non-productive, I just limit the amount of time that I spend with my family, particularly with my parents. And some years ago I wrote this long letter, and it was all the boundaries that I created, like I am no longer going to spend the night at my parents' house. But I wrote it as if it was a letter to my mom. Like, Mom, I'm not going to spend the night at your house, and I'm going to spend this much time when I come visit, and no more. And you're not permitted to say this and this and this and whatever. I wrote all these things out the intention was never to send it to her. The reason for it was for me to understand what the proper boundaries were for me. And so I love my parents. I have reached a point where I'm very happy with my life and my wife, my children, and the people that I'm surrounded by. Many love, incredible friends that have become family to me. And I realized I wouldn't be who I am were it not for my parents. As messed up and just totally jacked up and crazy as they were, and the things that they did and said, and my dad whipping me with a willow and all this terrible stuff. I'm not saying that it's right, but I'm saying that I wouldn't be me without it. And so I don't condone it, but I have accepted it. Like, I
Mm.
literally have opened my heart and said, I accept it and I forgive. And I don't know what type of terrible things happened to them. My dad was in war. My dad was in the Korean War. He was old enough for that. So, he had seen people in war, he'd seen people die. My mom, I've heard stories, but I don't know exactly the type of things that happened to her. But I know that her dad left home when she was like 7 years old. Her dad abandoned the family, and she was raised by her mother and her grandpa. So I realized that they have their own stories, and while the things they did affected me and affected me very deeply and hurt me, at the same time, I would not be me without them. And so, as I said, I have accepted them.
Yeah, it's really hard in this situation to really determine um if because I get what you're saying about from well, you want to be the person you are today, but it's also a thing of well, your parents didn't really do it correctly or did it the proper way, and so some people that listen to this story or hear the story that maybe have dealt with similar circumstances can go, well, I don't really like my parents and I never have spoken to them ever. Um, you know, but then you have some people that say my parents were really abusive to me growing up, but I've accepted them and I've forgiven them for what they've done. I think it I think the hardest part for me would be forgiving due to the fact of just what childhood was like for you. Um, how have your siblings done since leaving? Have they all had really um similar paths of success like you have? Have they um was there any kind of was it did any of them have like a well it was too late kind of moments?
Yeah. My siblings have really struggled, and they have different levels of challenges in life. A lot of there's a to put it into just like a package. I would say there's a lot of divorce. There is a
Mm,
lot of substance abuse. There's a lot of drug
mm,
abuse, alcohol abuse. There is a lot of cynicism. There's a lot of anger and hatred towards my parents, and just big emotions. Um, and there's some good things in there too, but the family is completely shattered and splintered. I'm kind of the goody two shoes. I stayed in the church. I've professed that I believe in God and Christ, and in these types of things. And some of my siblings have not have just felt like I'm just like a goody two shoes. Sometimes they have felt like then I have an older brother who's 9 years older than me. He and his wife think that I was terrible to him and that I was abusive to him. And I'm like, okay, well, when he was 16, I was 7. So I don't know what terrible thing I did to him when I was 7 and he was 16, but they don't speak to me and don't want it. So there's lots of that in the family. Like, this person doesn't speak to that person. Everyone kind of does their own thing. There isn't any closeness. I'm probably closest to my brother Jeff, who I shared the stories about. Right? He
Mm-hmm.
helped me so much, and he's been wonderful influence in my life. But he's had his challenges too. I write about some of where my story intersects with his story, and his many marriages, and some pretty wild things that have gone on in his life and how they've affected my life. And then my younger brother, who is those are the two that I'm probably closest to. But yeah, it's really broken, like really, really broken. And I think what has helped me to not be so broken anymore is that acceptance. But that's a more recent thing. A few years ago, after I had achieved quite a bit of success in business, I was at a business conference, and someone I really look up to, one of my business idols, he was at the conference and he was talking about how he had sold his business and had more time for himself and began to be self-reflective and realized that he didn't love himself and that he felt dark inside. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's how I feel. I feel like I don't want to tell anybody, but inside I feel hollow and I feel like people are going to find out I'm a fraud or a phony or something. I don't know, imposter syndrome, all these things that have been very real in my life. It started with the fact that I didn't feel like I was worthy of being loved. And so that took me on my own journey to seek professional counseling, to begin to work through some of the pain that I had experienced as a child and that reoccurs in my life. And that has helped me a lot to be able to forgive and to be able to accept where I am and how I got here. And I want to say again that in no way is that condoning. Someone who says, "Oh, I just stay away and I don't want anything to do with my family." That's probably the best. That could very well be the best thing for you. Don't when something is wrong and when people are hurting you, there is no reason that you should be guilted into being there with them and being hurt and abused and treated wrong. So, there's you can have a healthy distance and at the same time forgive. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I agree, and it makes sense. Have you been nervous about sharing any of this to, because you had said that you've mentioned about your siblings, things in the book. You've also have been on numerous podcasts talking about the struggles that you face. Have you worried about your family that you're not really close with hearing these stories and coming for you and getting some hate from them?
Yeah, I have had a little bit of that. They don't. Very few of them like the stories of the books, and I tried to be very careful. By the way, I was very sensitive with my siblings to not share things that didn't that weren't part of my connection to my story. And
Mhm.
so if it's not connected to me, I'm not sharing it. And so it's not like I'm dishing all the dirt on my family, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
dirt in the stories. And so, you know, um, none of my siblings have said that this isn't true. They have all said to me, like one of them said, how could you do that? How could you put this story out there? Because you're not the one who went through so much pain. I'm your older sibling, and I went through the pain so that you could have it so good. And so I didn't respond to that, but in my response inside is, hey, each of us have our own story, and so you should share your story too. But um, and others have been angry, and some, and my younger brother said, "Wow, Calvin, you you did a really good job of capturing the feeling of how we grew up and sharing it." So mixed, kind of mixed. The one person in my family, the only person in my family that so far does not and know about the book and hasn't read the book is actually my mother, but she's approaching 86, and it's unlikely at this point that she will learn of it or read it. But if she does, I've already played that through in my mind. I mean, I've shared what it was, and this is it is what it is.
Yeah, with this kind of story, that is something that a lot of people tend to really worry about is, to get hate from your own family for calling them out. But as you've done this interview, you've not called any names out. You've not said so and so did this, so and so did that. And that's kind of what I like about this podcast as well is I censor. I've talked about some people on here as well from my past that have done me wrong, and I don't ever give names. I give hints to who they are, but I don't drastically say Jane Doe did this.
Yeah.
This person did this to me, and if I do say a name, I bleep it out for this like the confidential reasons. And also I don't want a lawsuit coming my way of like, so you're speaking wrong out of my name, and and so bleeping it, or for me censoring it, is kind of a way for where you can't prove that it was for you. And
Yeah.
I think that's really key on this story. There might be family members from you that listen to this episode. If you're hi, how y'all doing? We're talking trash, but it's I want them to know that you do a really good job saying and sharing the story without drastically saying names. Because some people they can hear the story real quick to get online. They're like, "Ooh, okay, let me find this person and send hate their way."
Yeah.
A lot of people tend to do that. Um, I think, and we're kind of running up on a little bit of time here, but I think one question that I think for this that I would really like to end with is, with you being a father now and with your siblings having kids and everything, what's one thing that you want them to know about what childhood was like for you, and how are you making it to where they don't experience the same things that you did had to endure as a child?
I think anyone who's a parent can relate to that question, that there are things that you want to do differently for your children than how you were raised. Even if you had wonderful, loving parents, there are things that you want to do
Mhm.
differently. Well, in my case, there's a lot of things I want to do differently. And it's centered around love, that my children feel love and feel safe, and that they're not afraid that the next fight between mom and dad is going to end up with somebody dying, or that, you know, it's just the crazy things that worried me as a child. I don't want my kids to have those worries. That's the most important thing. Of course, I want to provide a good life for them, in a wonderful home and what have you. And I think the thing that I did to that would guarantee that my children had a good upbringing was marry a very wonderful woman. And my wife is incredible. She has been so supportive of me as I've gone through my journey. And I haven't always been the best version of Calvin. I'm learning too, and I'm trying to overcome. And I realize that I have my own triggers, things that happen, things, you say something, my wife will say something to me that maybe mirrors something that my mother used to say, and I don't even know it. I just know that I'm upset. And then sometimes I don't even know why. And it took me a long time to recognize. And I never really liked the term triggers. I feel like people are like, oh, I was triggered, and I'm like, "Ugh, control yourself." And I still think that in some cases, by the way. But I've also experienced that you can have an actual visceral body reaction to certain things, and
Mm.
you don't even sometimes realize it. And you have to do the work to overcome that. And so, yeah, that's where I am with my kids today. It's just love, raising my kids in love, safety, and protection. I have a 13-year-old son, a 7-year-old daughter, and I'm 50 years old. But last night I was jumping on the trampoline with my daughter, and then I was playing basketball with my son in the house. Well, it's kind of funny because I was on rollerblades. Our house is under construction, so there's like tile everywhere, and we're just enjoying it right now while the house is empty. And so we were playing basketball on rollerblades. Sounds crazy, but just giving my kids the life that I didn't have. That includes all the things that you would expect, education and everything, but it really is centered around love.
Well, I think your story is a huge success story of people that were able to get out of this scenario alive and successful careers. You don't make it kind of your, oh, I had an awful childhood. I can't do anything in the world. You kind of have shown that, yes, I did go through this. Yes, I did. I didn't go to school, but you prove people wrong. You said, you know what? No, I want to have an education. I want to have a career doing something that I really want to enjoy. I want to be able to live somewhere on my own where I follow my own rules. I know a lot of people love those kinds of victory stories, and they love hearing people that have gone through it because it encourages them and impacts them to be like, you know what, if he can do it, I can do it as well. It's just going to take a lot of hard work and time. And I think it's great that at 50 years old, even though you don't look 50, I've got to say,
Thank you.
even though it's audio, he does not look 50. He looks more like in his 30s. He looks really good to be 50. Here I am,
Thank you.
23 years old. I crack bones every time I get out of the bed. Like I feel like an 80-year-old person getting out of bed every morning. So it that
You
shows you
just need
how
more trampoline in your life.
uh I feel like now if I jumped on a trampoline, I'd break a bone. I worked at a
I've come close.
trampoline. I worked at a trampoline park for like for a week, and I was like, no, I can't do it because I was like, oh, I hadn't jumped on a trampoline in a very long time. I don't like it. My legs were sore the next day.
Well, no,
Yeah.
we're laughing about this, but I want to say that what you have said there is really, really, really important. I don't want it to go unnoticed. And I think it's the most important thing I can share with anyone through my story is that if your past will serve you today, and so I say it this way, your past is in service to you today. If you want to be a victim, your past can prove that you're a victim. If you want to be a hero who overcomes and is the hero of your story, your past can prove that you're a hero. So I think this the most important thing that I could share with anyone is that your past, the meaning that you assign to the past is very important. And I'm trying to assign meaning to my past that says I've I've overcome something very difficult and I'm very proud of where I am. And I want the meaning to be that I'm a hero in my story, and my story can prove that.
Well, Calvin, I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your story with me and sharing this really impactful. I mean it when I say it. I think so many people are going to feel so connected with this and will feel so motivated by it. And I think you're just a huge inspiration to so many young kids out there and even to adults that dealt with this when they were younger and they're just now starting to find ways to really cope with it and come to terms with what it was. So I give you huge props for that. Um, at the beginning, you had mentioned that you did release a book, um, hiding from the school bus. Where can people, if people would like to read your book and would like to really continue following your story and would like to really kind of maybe they have questions about, I was in this kind of household, I kind of dealt with this same thing, and it's just really wanting advice. Where can people find you? And most importantly, where can people find the book?
Yeah, sure, Noah. The book is available anywhere the books are sold. The audio version's on Audible. It's fantastic. It was read professionally. Sounds way better than my voice, I promise. the You can get it on Amazon. The book is an Amazon bestseller. It's also available through hidingfromtheschoolbus.com. If you go to hidingfromtheschoolbus.com, you can see all the links. You also can learn more about me there. You can learn about the stories, some of the stories. You can see pictures from my life and childhood. I'm on everything social media, and there aren't that many Calvin Bagleys out there. So, Calvin Bagley, just Google that, you'll find me on all the different socials, as well as my book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Audible or wherever you find books. And if it's impactful to you, then share it with a friend too. Thank you.
I will put all of his links in the description box below. The website for the book, to where if you would like to learn more about his story and would like to really connect with him on there, you can find that. I'll put links to where you can purchase his book as well as his social media platforms where you can get connected with him. It'll all be down there for easy access for you guys. Feel free to follow the podcast wherever you, excuse me, gosh. Feel free to follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon. iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora, is everywhere. So feel free to subscribe to where you get notified when new episodes drop. And as also, as always, follow this podcast on social media as well. Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, it's Noah's Podcast. So feel free to follow any of those platforms to keep updates about when new episodes drop, plus just some general behind the scenes info and some just behind the scenes stuff. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to today's episode. Hope y'all all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.